welcome you to the Lava Monthly Salon. I see lots of familiar faces, which makes me very happy. And Paul Nugent of the Aetherius Society, Reverend Paul Nugent of the Aetherius Society, you're going to be our first speaker today. So come on up. I'll talk about lava stuff during the break. We have two talks today. Paul is going to start us off, and then Carlton Davis will be our other talk today, and he's going to talk about the Pickle Works building. You might know it as the Citizens Warehouse in the Arts District. So he's going to give us a history of the Arts District from about 1982 to the mid-90s, which is a very important history. So this is number 27. This is our 27th. Jonathan Magieff, who owns this place, we're very grateful to let him have this here. And let's get started. Okay, so Paul, you're just going to get started. We're big fans of Aetherius. We go there on our occasional spiritual bus tours, and we're happy to have you back. You spoke about 2 years ago when we were at Clifton's.
Correct.
Okay, great. So I guess I've been thinking about this all week. The one sentence to introduce you: the universe is benevolent. That is what I want everyone to think about as you begin your talk. The universe is benevolent.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. I would agree that the universe is indeed benevolent. Well, thank you, Richard and Kim, for inviting me back to speak to the Los Angeles Visionaries Association here at wherever we are.
Cafe Figaro.
Cafe Figaro. Thank you. Richard, well, one thing actually quickly. Has anybody here heard of the Aetherius Society? 1, 2, 3, a few of you. But nobody is really too familiar with what we're about. Okay, well, I'm going to give a bit of background on that. Maybe quite a bit of background on that. But one thing that Richard did ask me to assume is that everybody here is good with the fact that extraterrestrial life exists, that UFOs are very real, and that they have been visiting this Earth, are visiting this Earth, and indeed have been visiting this Earth for thousands of years. I mean, that's an assumption which he's asked me to make. Well, the Aetherius Society, very briefly, we've been in Los Angeles since 1960. It was founded by an Englishman called Dr. George King, a Western Master of Yoga, in England in 1955, and was incorporated here in the state of California as a non-profit, charitable, religious, educational organization in 1960. Dr. King, born in England in 1919, when the Second World War came around in England in 1939, he was a conscientious objector. He recognized that it was wrong to kill. He had a very Christian childhood, he had a very psychic childhood. He knew that killing people was not something that we should be engaging in. But nonetheless, he recognized that Nazism was a bad thing. And so he signed up to somehow help, and he joined the fire service in London as a section leader. And he went through what was known as the Blitz, this devastating bombing of London, killing innocent civilians. And it greatly disturbed him. As I mentioned, in his childhood he had a lot of psychic experiences. But what he began to do coming towards the end of the Second World War, coming out of the Second World War, is he began to study and practice the ancient science of yoga, which was unusual in England, certainly in the 1940s, and he did it with a great intensity. He did it for up to 8 hours a day over a 10-year period. And it caused a force that we all have in the base of the spine, called the Kundalini, to rise through a channel in the spine called the Sushumna channel, and open the chakras, the psychic centers that we all have in our aura. And it enabled him to go into the deepest state of meditation known to man as samadhi. We know it more commonly in the West by the term cosmic consciousness. And it is in that experience of cosmic consciousness that one knows that it is all absolute oneness. And it's also a state of ecstatic bliss. It's the state that we're all here primarily to attain. And it was with this quite remarkable ability that in 1954 he was first contacted by an extraterrestrial intelligence by the name of Aetherius, which is how we get our name. Now I should say in 1954 this was the height of the Cold War, and it was also a time when flying saucers were very commonly seen. But it was also a time when mankind had gone mad. I don't know if anybody probably didn't see the talk I gave at the cancelled, the TEDx event, West Hollywood, that was held earlier this year. But because a lot of what I'm speaking about is regarded in Orthodox circles as, to use their term, quackery and woo. And I want to go on later on this morning in this talk to demonstrate actually it's not quackery and woo at all. It's extremely important, and we need it. And we need it because our world is going through tremendous crisis. Wherever you look, in every possible way, we are facing crisis. And I would say that we have created, or certainly are creating, the perfect storm. And what we need more than anything else is a radical new philosophy, and even more than that, a spiritual understanding of who and what we are in this incredible, vast, benevolent universe. But so coming back to that time in the 1950s, as I say, it's regarded by Orthodoxy as quackery and woo, but Orthodoxy, 4 years after that contact, in 1954, with our material scientists and our politicians, tested the equivalent of 1,600 hydrogen and atom bombs. This is the equivalent of those dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of the Second World War. And as they say, if that wasn't mad and criminal and insane enough, 4 years after that, in 1962, our material scientists and our politicians tested the equivalent of 12,000 hydrogen and atom bombs, the equivalent of those dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so we were literally threatening to destroy our civilization, which in the Aetherius Society we would say that we've actually done before in two previous civilizations. First, most recently Atlantis, and before that Lemuria. One could argue, and I would argue, that one of the main reasons why it was a time of tremendous UFO sighting is in an attempt, at least, for humanity to start thinking outside our tiny little box. And I think to that extent, crop circles, if any of you are familiar with crop circles, and wonderful work done by a good friend of mine, Suzanne Taylor, I think that they have, in a way, taken over from crop circles, taken over from UFO sightings to cause humanity to start thinking in a much broader and deeper way, which, as I say, I think is what we have to do. And again, in the talk I gave, the TEDx talk, I always like to quote somebody who I think summed it up terribly well, the Russian philosopher Alexander Solzhenitsyn, when he said, "The trouble with the world is that we have lost our consciousness of God." I think what he meant by that is we've lost our sense of place, we've lost our sense of awe at this incredible experience that we have here on this earth of life. What is it really all about? Who are we really? What is our real purpose? And I think again, it was quite well described by the astronomer Carl Sagan, who said when asking, who are we? He said, we find that we live on an insignificant planet of a humdrum star, lost in a forgotten, or tucked away in a forgotten corner of the universe, in which there are far more galaxies than people. And we need to get this kind of realization back into our philosophy of who and what we really are on this earth. If we are, because the problems that we have, although we're trying to fix them politically or economically or environmentally, they're much bigger than that. As I say, it's fundamentally a philosophical problem of recognizing, as we've been taught, in point of fact, by all the great religious or spiritual teachers who've come to this earth throughout our history. They've all taught us that we're an aspect of God, and that we're here to cooperate and love and to love and serve one another, which is just at this moment in time not part of our thinking. And I will say that in the Aetherius Society, we've had, since we were founded, as I say, in 1955, we really fall into two camps. We're a spiritual organization, but we also recognize the UFO aspect. And for a very long time, and only until a few years ago, the people in the Orthodox religions didn't want anything to do with the Aetherius Society because we had this weird UFO connection. And the people in the UFO crowd didn't want anything to do with the Aetherius Society because we have this weird spiritual aspect. But what we're seeing is that both of these two sides are beginning to realize the truth of both of those other elements. And the astronaut, that's what I'm trying to think of, the astronaut. What's beginning to open people's eyes is anybody here familiar with Dr. Edgar Mitchell? The sixth man to walk on the moon. Dr. Edgar Mitchell, as he points, his grandparents, his great-grandparents, after the Civil War, moved in covered wagons from the East Coast to Texas. His parents, or his father, was born in about 1903, when the Wright brothers were testing their aeroplanes, when we had first flight. And he says, and I went to the moon. And in just those 100 years, we've gone from covered wagons to the ability to go to the moon. And Dr. Edgar Mitchell, one thing he's come out and he said that we know UFOs exist. All we need to do is ask where they're from. In other words, what we're on is we're on this exponential curve. And it's very difficult to see into the future, and people who do try and look into the future tend to be ridiculed. Does anybody here know what I mean by Seward's folly? A few of you know what Seward's folly is. Well, Seward's folly, in terms of being a visionary and looking into the future, it's not easy. One tends to get ridiculed for these things. But Seward was Secretary of State here in the United States after the Civil War. And at the time, Russia was on the verge of getting into a war with Britain. And they needed to raise some money. And so they considered selling off some of their land, in fact the state of Alaska, to the United States. And Seward, who was the Secretary of State here in the United States, was keen to make that purchase. And everybody thought the man was ridiculous. But that massive piece of land
that at the time nobody thought, who the heck's ever going to go up there? And the Russians certainly didn't need it. They've got all of Siberia. What do we need Alaska for? But it was purchased in today's money of $1 an acre. And similarly, the Louisiana purchase, which wasn't just the state of Louisiana, but actually was over 800 square miles of the United States, that the French considered nobody's ever going to want that. I mean, because in those days everything was done by horse. Who's ever going to want to go beyond Louisiana? But anyway, it was bought by the United States of America at the equivalent in today's money of 47 cents an acre. I mean, so it's very difficult to be able to look into the future and know what's going to happen. But as I say, we are on an exponential curve of profound radical change on this earth, and we need to make a corresponding change in our thinking and understanding of who and what we are, which is where this message of these extraterrestrials who spoke through Dr. George King, by going into what we call a positive yogic samadhic trance, why this message is so very relevant, and why people both in the UFO crowd and the traditional spiritual crowd communities are waking up to it. Because it's obvious for people like Edgar Mitchell, who, as I say, have been into space, said we know that UFOs exist. Scott Carpenter, another astronaut, he said the whole time we were in space, we were observed by UFOs. Gordon Cooper, who testified at the United Nations in the 1960s, said we know that our government is sitting on hard evidence of UFOs. So it's something that can't really be ignored, but the trouble is that orthodoxy has difficulty getting its head around it, because it's determined that there's no other life on the other planets in our solar system. But that's only because it's looking at it in terms of this one physical dimension. And one thing about this message of the beings speaking through Dr. King from other worlds is that there is more than just this one physical dimension. And I think that as we go into the future on this profound exponential curve of radical thinking, one thing that we can see in the future is that we will become aware that there are other dimensions of existence besides and beyond just this physical plane. And I think that another aspect that we'll come to realize is that all things, talking about a benevolent universe, all things are living, all things are conscious at one level or another. All of creation is conscious, including this planet, including all planets, but including the Mother Earth, including the Sun. There is consciousness. Wherever there is matter, there is consciousness. And I think that this is something that we're already beginning to understand and appreciate. But as I say, right now, orthodoxy, which holds sway and makes people like Seward seem ridiculous, has a great deal of difficulty in believing that, or admitting, I should say, in admitting to flying saucers, because it's beyond their present scope of understanding. Because as I say, they've determined that there's no other life in this solar system. And I was at the Griffith Observatory a couple of weeks ago. My brother's family were over from England with his 6 children. We took them up to the observatory. And if you've been to the observatory, you'll know that they've got this wonderful scale of our solar system. They've got the sun, and it's all done in sort of inches and feet and yards, and a few inches away they've got where Mercury would be, and I think about 4 or 5 feet away is the Earth. And several yards as you go out beyond there, where you've got Venus and you've got Earth, then you've got Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and beyond. Has anybody seen this? Okay, it's quite fascinating. But what's even more absolutely staggering is that the nearest star to our solar system, the nearest other solar system on that same scale. Anybody any idea where it would be on that same scale? The nearest star in our galaxy, it would be in Las Vegas. It would be in Las Vegas. Here we are just a few inches away from the sun, but the nearest Alpha Centauri would be on that scale in Alpha Centauri. And it's also been believed that there are more stars in this benevolent universe than there are grains of sand on all the beaches in all the world. This is what we're beginning to awaken to, how incredibly small we are. But as I say, orthodoxy has a difficulty in accepting life from other planets, because if it is from the nearest solar system of Alpha Centauri, that would mean that they'd have to be able, which is over 4 light years away, they'd have to travel at incredible velocities, the speed of light being, I think it's about 180,000 miles per second. Well, in the Aetherius Society, we don't believe that the speed of light is the fastest speed. In fact, Dr. King, the founder of the Aetherius Society, he said that the fastest speed is a point of consciousness under karmic direction. If you can think, is a point of consciousness under karmic direction, because everything in creation, everything in this benevolent universe comes under, if you like, a law, a natural law of karma, which we've been taught in various ways. I mean, we believe, I mean, Jesus Christ spoke of karma as you sow, so shall you reap. There's a consequence for not just for every action that we make, but for every thought, for every feeling that we have, there's a reaction. And I think, again, in terms of being visionaries, looking into the future, how we will recognize that there are other dimensions of existence, that all things are living, that consciousness is in everything, that also we are responsible for all our actions and all our thoughts, which dictate how our lives happen to us. Because, have any of you seen the wonderful play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead? Yeah, it's a wonderful play by Tom Stoppard. It's a farce, but what it is it's a play going on inside of the play Hamlet. I mean, we're all familiar with the play Hamlet. So Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is sort of segued in, where these characters show up in Hamlet, but the rest of the time they've got their own life going on. And in a way, this is a bit like us. We've got our own life going on without realizing that we're part of a much bigger picture than our tiny understanding and conception of ourselves, which does not deny the fact that these greater laws still apply to us, like karma. And tied in, you can't really have karma without reincarnation. We're here to evolve. This is, I think, another thing that as we look into this critical future and this profound change that we need to make in our thinking and understanding of who we are, is that we create all that happens to us in our life by our thought and our actions. But when we die, there being other dimensions of existence, we vibrate for a time to that dimension until the exact right karmic time of our rebirth. This, what I'm saying here is this is, as Richard asked me, one of the things to speak about is the message of Aetherius, or the message of the Aetherius Society, which, by the way, is not at all unique. Very little is unique to the Aetherius Society. I mean, there's nothing new in the concepts of karma and reincarnation. As I say, we would even argue that Christ taught the law of karma, but as you sow, so shall you reap. Christians would probably disagree with that. We also believe that Christ came from another world. We believe that Christ, when he says in, I don't know the exact biblical text, but he says, I am from the bright and morning star, which is the planet of Venus. We also, when he said, I think John 14 verse 2, in my Father's house there are many mansions. Because Jesus, we believe, came from Venus, and in those missing, we're not alone in thinking this, but in those missing lost years, which is well documented, he was in India and Tibet. And there are records of such a being there at this time, where he learned to do things like levitate, in other words, walking on water, where he learned to do things like manifestation with the loaves and the fishes. And he also said it somewhere in there, John 14, I think maybe verse 20, it doesn't really matter, but he said, greater things than I have done, you will do. These things, we're here, as I say, to raise the Kundalini. It's why we reincarnate. Our primary purpose, this is what is so critical in terms of if we are to avoid if we are to avoid this perfect storm that we are creating here on this earth, this radical change that we need in our philosophy and in our understanding, is to become conscious that our primary purpose is to evolve. That is not, as I think we're beginning to realize, it's not just to sort of amass as much money as we possibly can. And so the whole law of karma fundamentally is a pressure. Dr. King described it as a pressure towards conformity. A pressure towards conformity. What he meant by that is a pressure of you, the mind, when I say you, I mean each one of us, a pressure of you, the mind, and you, the soul, towards you, the spirit. And this pressure is an increasing intensity that is bearing down on each and every one of us, to become much more conscious of who and what we really are, as we are essentially divine beings. As some guy, I know Deepak Chopra said it, I'm not sure if he originally said it, doesn't matter, but he said we are not human beings having occasional spiritual experiences. We are spiritual beings having occasional human experiences. And so when we die, instead of it being either oblivion or eternal hell or eternal heaven, we believe that in terms of the message of the Aetherius Society, and again I will repeat, this is not unique in any way to the Aetherius Society, that we vibrate, that our karmic pattern vibrates to a certain dimension, another dimension of existence, depending on the karmic pattern that we've created for ourselves. Hence Dante's hells and the varying degrees of heaven. But as I say, we are awaiting rebirth at the exact right karmic time, in the exact right karmic circumstances, for us to learn the exact karmic lessons that we sowed for ourselves in our previous life/lives. And through this process of working towards attaining cosmic consciousness which Christ attained when in India and Tibet, wherever else he was, through similarly very intense yogic practice that Dr. King engaged in, up to 8 hours a day over a 10-year period, causing this force, the Kundalini, to rise through the Sushumna channel, as the Buddha attained. And likewise the Buddha in the Flower Adornment Sutra said the universe is filled with intelligent life on innumerable planets. And just on that, there's also Dr. Raghavan, who taught Sanskrit for over 50 years at Madras University. He's no longer alive, but he said, after 50 years of researching the ancient Vedic texts, I am convinced that we've been visited by extraterrestrials for over, I think he said, since at least 4000 BC. But it's covered up. Well, I don't want to get into conspiracies, but it's not recognized. It's not culturally recognized by our present culture. So when we come back through in the process of reincarnation, eventually, by our own thoughts and actions, how we choose to direct our lives, we will naturally, if we engage in prayer, which is something Richard wants me to also talk about, which I will do briefly, and pranayama, which is yoga breathing exercise, when we make the primary focus of our life to attain at least enlightenment, which is a stage towards cosmic consciousness, when we are able to attain this state of cosmic consciousness at will, when we can bring it about at will, then we are no longer bound to this planetary cycle, to this planetary system. We go through an initiation, for want of a better word, of ascension, which again Christ demonstrated to us ascension. He demonstrated that we're more than just this physical body, and that well, as we know, he came back from what we believe was death, albeit in a more subtle body. And we're here to do the same thing. But we're here to go on, not just to go back to that state of nirvana, which is commonly, as I said, in terms of cosmic consciousness, recognized as Sat Chit Ananda, which was absolute bliss, a totally blissful state. Because it goes on. It goes on beyond nirvana, onto other levels of existence initially within our own solar system. As we believe in the Aetherius Society that all of the other planets are inhabited, albeit on a different level of dimension, a higher level of dimension. I would argue that cosmic consciousness is just the beginning. We haven't even really begun. We don't really begin to comprehend what we are a part of in this infinite universe until we can attain and have the experience of cosmic consciousness, in which we know that all things are living. It's all absolute oneness. It's absolute bliss. But as I say, we don't just go back to a certain oblivion or a state of nirvana as it's traditionally described, but we go on to higher other states of experience through this solar system. And this is all described in a series of 9 transmissions which came through Dr. King in 1961. Actually here in Los Angeles, a bit of Los Angeles cultural history. These transmissions came through here in Los Angeles, to be absolutely precise, in Hollywood, which is where we are.
Well, maybe, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you mentioned it. You can talk about why Dr. King chose to put an ashram in Los Angeles instead of in the Himalayas.
Well, okay, that's a good question. Why here in Los Angeles as opposed to in the Himalayas? It's an extremely good question. The reason is because these are critical times, as mentioned, is in the last 100 years described so well by Dr. Edgar Mitchell. We've gone, well, a little more than 100 years now, but we've gone from covered wagons to being able to go to the moon. But it's because of our extremely limited, extremely self-centered understanding of who we have created a very broken world, a very broken planet that is, wherever you look, politically, socially, economically, environmentally, it's a mess. It's a tragic, tragic, tragic mess. It's a crying shame. Because we've lost, when Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, we've lost our consciousness of God, I totally agree with that. The only thing I might question is if we ever had it in the first place. If we ever really had a real understanding of who and what we actually are and what we're a part of. But these times being critical times, these are not times for retreating into ashrams in the Himalayas or anywhere else. Because this is a critical message. Because we're living in critical times, and it needs to be given it needs to be given, as the Master Aetherius said, service in the clatter, service in the noise. It's far nicer hanging out in an ashram in the Himalayas than being in the dirt and the grime of a city like Los Angeles. But this is where the people are. This is where people are. In fact, in a way, Hollywood is a center with its whole movie business. And trust me, we're a non-profit organization. We're certainly not in this for the money. It's not about the money. It is about service. Coming back to these 9 transmissions given in 1961 in this city of Los Angeles, to which Dr. George King came in 1960. By going into a deep, positive, yogic, samadhic trance, raising the kundalini to the higher centers, to the Christ center and the crown chakra, these masters from other worlds spoke through him. And in this particular book, which has been made into a book, a master from Mars who goes by the pseudonym of Mars Sector 6, it's a pseudonym, as is Aetherius for that matter. He describes this journey that we're all on. And the first essential step is bravery. Bravery. Because without bravery, nothing else will really happen. And what is, I think, meant by bravery is bravery to honor the truth. Bravery to honor our conscience. And it's not always easy. It certainly wasn't easy for him, for Dr. King or any other, standing up as a conscientious objector. But in his conscience he knew that to kill was wrong. And we all have this conscience, but we tend to bury it, we ignore it. So bravery is the first step, to honor that fundamental spark of all-knowingness, that spirit that is in each and every one of us. What arises out of that is the second freedom, which is love. Because behind that prompting there is this benevolent force in the universe of love that we need to engage much more than we do. And what comes out of that, the third stage, the third freedom, is service. Instead of being selfish and just thinking of me and mine, we begin to unravel this thing of enlightenment by recognizing that all things are living and what is in me is in you. And that by helping you, I'm also helping me, but I'm helping all of us. So we get engaged in ways of being of service, which is what the Aetherius Society is fundamentally all about. And our motto is taken from that third transmission of service, the one statement. Service is the jewel in the rock of attainment.
Paul.
Yeah.
We've got to end soon.
Okay,
I'm going to tell us about Aetherius. I want to get questions. So
yeah. I just want to finish off because this is understanding. This is great. What comes out of that? What comes out of bravery, love, and service is enlightenment. These are the stages, the steps towards enlightenment. Beyond enlightenment, cosmic consciousness. Beyond cosmic consciousness, as I mentioned, ascension. But not just back to nirvana or oblivion, but to an experience on another dimension or on another planet. So interplanetary existence. Beyond interplanetary existence, Saturnian existence, the most evolved culture in our solar system. And beyond that, solar existence. And I know that this is, it's difficult to really sort of get one's head around, but because one needs to have that experience that everything is conscious, everything is living. There's nothing that is not a part of this divine oneness. And in recognizing that yes, life is everywhere. And the other book I want to particularly mention, which is what brought me personally into the Aetherius Society over 25 years ago in England. I was a practicing Christian. And we believe that this is called the 12 Blessings. 12 transmissions given through Dr. King, not in Los Angeles, but in London in 1958, on 12 consecutive Sundays in 1958. We believe given by Jesus, the very same Jesus who, died on the cross 2,000 years ago, which in cosmic time is a blip. It's nothing in cosmic time. And in this wonderful series of transmissions, which also includes prayers, by the way. It's a literal cosmic extension to the Sermon on the Mount. Back then, they weren't going into space. They were at a different level of evolution back then. But now that we're going into space, we need to realize that this cosmos is living. that the earth, the early blessings, well, blessed are they who work for peace, blessed are the wise ones, blessed are they who love, blessed are the planetary ones, blessed are the thanksgivers, blessed are they who heal. The seventh blessings, blessed is the Mother Earth. And there's wonderful descriptions. If you come to our temple in Hollywood on a Sunday morning, if you were there this morning, you'd have heard one of these transmissions. It's quite amazing. I would really challenge each and every one of you to come and hear one of these blessings. So they say, when I heard these things over 25 years ago, I was an Orthodox Christian. So trying to get my head around Jesus speaking through Dr. King in 1958 was a struggle. But I listened to these things, and they were very pure, and they were very profound. Very, very, very profound, very relevant. The eighth blessing is the mighty sun. The ninth blessing, blessed are the supreme lords of karma. The 10th blessing, blessed is the great being known as the galaxy. It thinks, it breathes, it feels pain, it meditates. The galaxy within which we exist. This tiny, tiny galaxy in which there are more people than there are galaxies. And our nearest star, as I say, is in Las Vegas compared to us being a few inches from our own sun. It's quite staggering what we really are a part of. And the 11th blessing, blessed are the supreme lords of creation. And the 12th blessing is a blessing to the absolute. I know Richard's pushing me here a little bit for time, but I just want to, we did start late. And that is that when it gets to the 11th blessing, blessed are the supreme lords of creation. In that text that Jesus gives, he says that these are the gods of the gods. In other words, these are the gods of the galaxies. These are the gods of the supreme lords of karma. These are the gods of the planets, the supreme lords of creation, who brought all of this into manifestation. And yet, when it gets to the 12th blessing, to the absolute, it says not even, or Jesus I should say, not even the supreme lords of all creation, who are the gods of the gods, can do justice to the picturization of the magnificence of God. And the reason I want to just make that point and emphasize that is because likewise we're on this exponential journey into greater and greater and greater discoveries of absolute realization and bliss. It just gets more and more and more incredible. The higher up the more we evolve, our capacity to experience becomes greater and greater, more and more phenomenal, more and more incredible, more and more ecstatic. And even the supreme lords of creation, who are the gods of the gods, not even they can do justice to the picturization of that which is behind it all. And to touch briefly on prayer, which I know. Okay, more questions?
Yeah.
You all, okay. Anybody got any questions? Nobody's got any questions?
A question on the prayer you were about to comment on.
Sorry?
A question about the prayer you were about to comment on.
Yeah, okay. Question about the prayer. Thank you very much. Mahatma Gandhi, he said, prayer, properly understood and applied, is the most potent instrument of action. Now, I'm just going to ask a question. How many of each animal, when the great flood came to earth, how many of each animal did Moses take onto the ark? No. Sorry? No. Not Moses. Oh, okay, you're a very bright crowd, because normally everybody says two. You see, normally everybody says two, and you say no, it's two, and you beat them. But of course, what Moses took none. You're absolutely right. It was Noah. Okay, so the only reason I said that is because Mahatma Gandhi said prayer, and this is the crucial phrase. This is the crucial phrase: properly understood and applied is the most potent instrument of action. We tend, when we say, "Oh, I'll keep in my prayers," it's not very intense. It's not very. It tends to be quite superficial. But in this interconnected universe, prayer is a very profound force. It's going to the very depth and heart of one's own self, one's own being. I like to think that they say healing is feeling, but prayer is care. You have to care. You have to really care. It means something to you. It means something to you that people are in critical, difficult situations in our world. And trust me, they are. So prayer is making an appeal to this higher force. You're connecting with that own inner spark within yourself, to that higher. You're opening yourself up to that benevolent universe, and you're drawing down that immense, unlimited, infinite power of love, and you are directing it in a very deliberate way, with using your imagination, using your mind, using the higher abilities of your mind, inspiration, and directing it to that situation. And this is something that we do in the Aetherius Society. At the end of 9 of the 12 blessings, Jesus gave a prayer. We use these prayers in most of our services. In one service in particular, which we've been doing each week for over 40 years here in Los Angeles, I invite you again, I challenge you again, each to come to something we call Operation Prayer Power, where we invoke this energy. We invoke spiritual energy, mainly in part through mantra. We have a team of people reciting mantra. But somebody else who is using the prayers in the 12 blessings and directing that force into a physical container we call a battery. It's primarily filled with crystal. And we invoke this spiritual energy, as I say, through mantra and prayer, using mudra, which are hand signs, into the crystal within the battery. And each week we charge the battery with spiritual energy or prayer energy. And then as situations occur around the world, whether it's something like a hurricane or something like Fukushima, which is a chronic situation to which we have been sending a tremendous amount of energy, and remarkable things have been happening in Fukushima, including many sightings of UFOs. But hurricanes, earthquakes, storms, cyclones, whatever it may be, peace talks. We then direct this prayer energy to that situation in a very concentrated stream. And literally, we have seen what would have been described as miracles. This is something we can all do. In fact, we're all here to do. If we want to evolve, if we want to activate the Kundalini, if we want to be of love and service and start gaining enlightenment, which is what we have to do if we're to get around these massive problems that we have on this earth, then be engaged in something like prayer, because it's, as Mahatma Gandhi said, properly understood and applied is the most potent instrument of action. And I should just add to that. When we do send prayer energy, we do not do it to change people's minds, which would be a form of black magic. We just send it. It's offered for relief workers to tap into and bring into themselves. And as I say, we've seen profound things happen.
Hold on. We have to let people take a break. I don't want you to go away. I want you to stay right here. Carlton has to set up. I want to let people that want to get a coffee do that right now. We'll be back in 12 minutes to start Carlton's talk. People that have questions, I know you all do, stay here. But Paul, we just have to I know you have your Mount Baldy, so tell people about your Mount Baldy trip next week, and then people can run downstairs right now, and we'll be back in 12 minutes to start Carlton's talk. And while you're answering questions, Carlton and I are going to set up this computer. So everyone that needs to get up can get up. Paul's going to just wrap this up informally while we set up. You can go again. Okay.
If you want to, one thing we've been going to Mount Baldy for over 50 years. I really didn't get too much chance to talk about how the Aetherius Society in particular is cooperating with extraterrestrial intelligences we call the Cosmic Masters. But between 1958 and 1961, they charged 19 mountains around the world with energy
that we can go, that we can tap into a higher frequency of energy. And one of those locations is Mount Baldy, just east of Los Angeles. We've been going there since 1959. And for the last 4 years, we've organized an interfaith world peace pilgrimage. Several hundred people from all different faiths going to Mount Baldy. The 5th annual Interfaith World Peace Pilgrimage is going to be next Sunday. And so on your table there, you should have one of these flyers. You're welcome to join us and tap into this higher energy and send it out to the world for healing and upliftment and world peace. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, we're already over, right? But I'm more interested in the social history of Los Angeles, and I want to know where your society is and
Hollywood.
not the field, where in Hollywood.
Near Sunset and Vine. 3 blocks south of Sunset, 1 block east of Vine.
Okay, can you just summarize in one sentence or two the social history of your society? How, what kind of challenges it encountered, how it contributes to the global...
I'll talk to you private. I'll let you know that separately. Anybody got any other questions about the philosophy of the Aetherius Society? You're all good? Okay, thank you very much.
So, Paul, you've got your book right here.
Yeah, there's more books about it. Yeah.
So why don't you